In today's video, I'm going to explain to you why you need ND filters for your DJI Mini 2, or any drone for that matter, and which ones I think are the best. Let's jump right in. So before we talk about what ND filters are, why you need them for your DJI Mini 2, and which ones I personally like and use the most, I just want to say 90.3% of you aren't subscribed to my channel. So if you're new around here, please make sure to hit the subscribe button. And if you don't want to miss any of my other drone related videos, please make sure that notification bell's on too. And lastly, if you learned something new in this video, please make sure to hit the like button. So the number one comment I always see on great drone footage on YouTube and social media is, what filters did you use for this shot? And it's a question I see commonly asked. But before we get into what are the, in my opinion, best filters, let's explain what ND filters are, because some people new to flying, new to drone flying, might not know what ND filters are. So simply put, an ND filter is a partially opaque piece of glass that cuts down the light getting into the sensor of your camera, the little hole that lets light in. So why would you want to do this? Why would you want to cut down the light getting into your camera? Well, it's all to do with shutter speed. ND filters allow you to set the correct shutter speed relative to your frame rate that gives you motion blur. And what's motion blur? Well, when you see movement in real life, your eyes will see blurriness. The movement will look blurry to you, and that is motion blur, and that is a natural look. So if you have anything moving in your drone shot, or if your drone is moving, having too high a shutter speed will remove this blur. Because the shutter speed is really fast, it's taking many more images a second, and that way the motion blur is removed, and this just makes the movement look too sharp and too unnatural. So do you need ND filters and do you need motion blur? Well, if your drone movement is really slow, whereas your drone's barely moving, or the object that you're filming isn't moving, or you're taking photos, then no, you don't need motion blur because the movement's so slow or it's a still image. And in that case, you don't need ND filters, because even with images, you can just crank the shutter speed up to whatever you want. Or if you've even got a high shutter speed, but your drone's moving very, very slowly, so 1/1000th shutter speed, you're not going to need ND filters because you're really not going to notice motion blur. But if you are making big movements, or you're following a car, for example, or the object's moving really quickly, then motion blur will make your shot much better. So let's dive even further. To understand ND filters and their use, we need to understand exposure, or how bright an image is. And when it comes to setting exposure, there are 3 settings in your drone that you can tweak or change to dial in exposure or brightness. You can change shutter speed, aperture, and ISO. So starting with aperture and the DJI Mini 2, aperture is the size of the hole of your sensor that lets light in, and the DJI Mini 2, it's fixed, so you can't change it. So we can instantly disregard that as a setting we can tweak. ISO, what ISO does is it increases the brightness of the image. And when it comes to the DJI Mini 2, which is already producing quite a noisy image a lot of the time, it's really best to leave ISO at 100. You can increase it slightly when needed, but I never do. I always leave it on 100. The DJI Mini 2 already produces quite sharp, noisy images at times, so it's best to leave ISO at 100 and not look near it, in my opinion. So that discounts that as another setting we can tweak. So that leaves shutter speed, and the main way to set exposure in the DJI Mini 2 is using your shutter speed. And as a general rule of thumb, across all cameras for motion blur, you want a shutter speed at 2 times your frame rate. So if you're filming at 24, 25 FPS, you want your shutter speed to be 1/50. And if you're filming at 30 FPS, you want your shutter speed to be 1/60. Now, if you go out on even a slightly bright day and you set your shutter speed at 1/50 because you think, hey, Matthew's told me to do that, for motion blur I'm going to go out and do it, you're going to see just white. Your image is going to be completely blown out. On a normal bright day, you're probably going to need a shutter speed of something like 1/1000th to get decent exposure. And this is where an ND filter comes in. Basically, putting a pair of sunglasses over your lens to reduce the light coming into your camera means you can bring the shutter speed down to 1/50 and get that really nice cinematic motion blur. So now that you hopefully understand how ND filters can really benefit you in getting cinematic footage and why you should carry some in your camera bag, let me tell you about these. And these are not sponsored, I bought these by my own money, obviously. these I find to be the best ND filters for the DJI Mini 2. And these are the Flyco 2 PGYTECH ND filters. The link is in the description where you can pick them up on Amazon. Now these aren't the cheapest ND filters that you can get online. It's quite hard to get DJI Mini 2 filters online. There's not a huge range, whereas something like the likes of the Air 2S, there's quite a large range you can pick up, and even DJI's producing their own now. DJI doesn't produce their own for the Mini 2. And so you don't have a huge range to pick from, but these are the ones I found the best. And there's a few reasons for that. The first is the build quality. Now the way these lenses attach to the DJI Mini 2 is probably the best of a bad scenario. The way they work is they use two little hooks in the back, and all DJI Mini 2 ND filters attach the same way. So these aren't proprietary, but I find them to be better than others. They all use the two prongs to attach, but most I find to be very, very, very flimsy, whereas these don't feel as flimsy, feel a little bit more secure. And when you're moving them on and off all the time, you just don't want to get the impression that they're going to break. These seem much more robust, and after taking them off and on hundreds of times, I haven't had any of the prongs break yet. And even just the casing around the lens itself is metal and not plastic, so build quality wise they just feel very sturdy. And like I say, when the motion to put them on and off is fittery, you do want them to feel like they've got a good build quality, and these do. The second reason why I like these is they include all the stops that you need. So ND filters come in stops. So you'll get, for example, an ND8, which is quite a light pair of sunglasses, and it goes all the way up to something like an ND64, which is quite a dark pair of sunglasses. Now, a lot of the filter kits available for the DJI Mini 2 stop an ND32, when really you need an ND64, which this kit includes. On a bright sunny day, you're really going to need an ND64 to be able to get that shutter speed down to 1/50. The last reason, and arguably I find one of the most important reasons with these, is that they're oil, dust and scratch resistant, and the main thing is the oil resistance, the scratch resistance too. Because of the way you take these on and off the camera of the DJI Mini 2, it is literally impossible to take them on and off, and trust me, I try every time, without sticking your thumb over the lens. It's too fittery, and to be able to get them on and off, your thumb goes all over the lens, and that leaves oil marks from your thumb, and then you have to wipe it off. And then usually the way I do this is just I use a microfiber, and so it's really handy that they're oil and scratch resistant, because when you're wiping them all the time, because like I say, you're just getting them dirty, putting them on and off, to be able to just give it a quick clean with a microfiber and not get any marks on it is a massive plus. And I've been wiping mine with a microfiber, again, hundreds of times, and I'm yet to scratch one of the lenses. And when they're not cheap, you don't want to damage them, so it's good that they're resistant to things like that. So that's what ND filters are for the DJI Mini 2, and that's my recommendation of the ones you should pick up. Again, link is in the description down below. If you've learned something new, please hit that like button. If you're new around here and not subscribed and like drone related videos, please make sure to hit that subscribe button. Please make sure the notification bell's on so you don't miss any of my other videos. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.